Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the messy middle of being out on your own and starting over with the people who've done it. I'm your host, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into today's story of starting over. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, the stories of starting over. And thank you for being part of the team of passionate people trying new things, starting over, creating careers, and never resting on what's been done before. Holy podcasts, I cannot believe this is episode 25. If you've been on the journey with me for a while, you'll know this already, but my original plan was 6 episodes just to dip my toe in the water and try something new for myself. But it seems there are loads of us craving these stories to connect and learn from each other on navigating through the unknown and throwing those rule books out of the window. So again, thank you for being here. Let's keep growing this thing together. My guest today is Amie McNee, aka Inspired to Write. And she has unknowingly played a huge part in giving me the courage to step into my own creativity. She's a woman dedicated to supporting creative, artistic souls to step into their magic and create what it is that they want in the world. And yes, if you're thinking it, business is in fact art. Her commitment to the self-work that's required on the journey is endlessly inspiring. And I hope if you've been feeling a little muddled or challenged lately, that this chat will give you just what you need to keep going and trying in whatever it is you're creating. A little swear warning, we do get a bit sweary, so perhaps this isn't one for the school pickup, but here is my chat with the wonderful Amie McNee. Now, to say I've been looking forward to this interview would be a pretty big understatement. Allow me to introduce you to the ever-inspiring, supportive, passionate creative Amie McNee. Amie is an author, creative coach, speaker, and podcaster. She writes both historical fiction and non-fiction books about creativity and living a creative life, and she dedicates herself to supporting others to follow their dreams, helping thousands of creatives all over the world to move through resistance and chase their callings. Now, I was first introduced to Amie when I followed an Instagram rabbit hole that led me to her page called Inspired to Write. And it's there that she shares her journey of creating and inspires other creatives to get out of their own way and release their creative magic into the world through impactful, shareable quotes and conversation starters, also called Love Stories to Creatives. I wish I could find the first post of Amie's that I shared, but honestly, I have so many saved, it's a little out of hand. So I grabbed a few of my favorite recent standouts to give you a bit of a theme for Amie sharing. This first one is one of my favorites. Your arts and expression is allowed to change as you grow. It's a good thing. It's your alchemy. Some people might not like your new way of creating, but don't let that stop you from letting others witness your evolution. And it's safe to be hopeful for your own creative success. And with all due respect, get over yourself and write the book, start the podcast, and start the business. I'd like to meet somebody who doesn't need this incredible energy in their life. Amie, welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Thank you, Kim. I'm so honored to be here. And thank you for seeing me and seeing my work in the way that you do.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's an absolute pleasure. It's always a light in my feed, and it's a pleasure to have you today. And to kick us off, a little bit of an icebreaker, just to get us going. How would your husband, James, describe you?
I could bring him in right now if you want. That's a great question. Okay, let's see. How would Jimmy describe me? It's so funny, like we work together, live in like a 2-room apartment together. Like I'm never, very rarely not with him. And yeah, that question really is like, that's such a head scratcher. I guess, you know, I'm fiery. I'm very headstrong, and I'm also simultaneously soft. And I think that's how he sees me. And I really appreciate the way he sees me because it teaches me about myself.
That's so beautiful. We often see the reflection of ourselves in others.
Yeah.
It's rarely what we think about ourselves, isn't it?
Beautiful. Yeah.
Amie, take me back to well before this moment in time, that beautiful bio, which I appreciate is a capture of right now, and our lives do change and evolve. But take me back to the earliest version of your career. Who were you and what were you doing?
It's a great question. I've had a really interesting journey when it comes to work and making money. And it's been very incoherent at times. It's not a very neat story at all. But back in the day, before I really committed to creating, I was a waitress, I was a personal assistant, I worked in like finance, which is absolutely hilarious. I was a personal trainer, and all these things, like you were lucky to see me in them for a year, really. And I would just jump from one thing to the other, desperately trying to find a space where I could kind of exhale and feel financially supported, but also nourished in my soul. And I kept coming back to the fact that all I wanted to do was to create. So that was really the start of my creative journey.
Wow, that is a peppered career journey. Finance was one I was not expecting.
Yeah.
That's very cool. I imagine that was a bit of a challenge.
I was so bad.
Oh, love it. But you got to try these things, don't you? You never quite know what's going to stick or what parts of what you learn in these little bits of the journey lead into the bigger thing.
Totally. And like, whilst I did not enjoy any of the work that I really did before I decided to work for myself, it taught me so much along the way. And I don't think I would swap any of it out, even though at times it was ridiculously painful. But yeah, finance, I was a personal assistant for a finance like advisor. And it was just, pretending to care about superannuation is really difficult.
So relatable. Did you ever flirt with the idea of sticking on that non-creative career path?
Definitely, because I was so frequently told that having a creative career is not feasible. So I kept, the amount of job searches I had, and I spent a huge amount of time unemployed because as I bounced from one job to the other, where I couldn't stand it anymore, and then I would try and find another one. I was always trying to find something that could be bearable for me. That was kind of like what I was trying to look for. What can I just be able to bear so that I can create on the side? Because I know that, as I've been told hundreds of times, creating will never sustain me financially. So I need to find a career that I can just like cope with while I, have a nourishing kind of extracurricular life. And so I looked a lot in marketing, a lot in publishing, and I had what I can now see now are synchronous rejections from those industries. But I had applied for, dozens and dozens of jobs, and I'd often get quite far in the process before, I don't know if I'd unconsciously self-sabotage, but I was never picked for the job. And so that was kind of where at the very end of my jumping around from being a PA, being a personal trainer, being a waitress, I was like, okay, I'm going to get into marketing because it's kind of creative, or I was going to get into publishing with the marketing side of it. It's like, it's to do with books. It's like, it's a shadow career, as Julia Cameron would say. It's kind of near the creativity, but it isn't the creativity. But nothing ever stuck. And all of those interviews crashed and burned around me. And it was like, after the, I don't know how many interviews that I had, I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to do something myself.
And those rejections in the moment, I imagine they were pretty challenging to work through.
Hugely, because it was such a strange grief, because I didn't want it. But at the same time, I was like, well, I was living in my, with my in-laws. I was in serious amounts of credit card debt. I was unemployed and afraid, very apt. And so every time it was a no, I was like, holy shit, I'm getting rejected for stuff I don't even want. Like, this is the bottom of I'm getting rejections from my books, from publishers. So I'm getting rejected from the stuff that I want. And then I was getting rejected from the stuff that I just only could vaguely sense that I maybe could bear. It was horrible. It was one of the lowest moments of my life, literally swimming in rejection letters from all types of places and not even really wanting what I was asking for.
That's so challenging. And when did Inspired to Write the page, your connection to your audience, when did that start to play a role in your life?
So I started Inspired to Write. I was still living at home with my parents. So it's been a really long time. I think I was maybe like 20. It was like 10 years ago. And I was lying there and I was like, I just feel so lonely on this journey, because I've been writing my novels for a long time, maybe 12 years now. And I was like, I'm so alone in this journey. I just wish that there was someone out there who was talking about what it means to like be an artist or to be a creative. And I couldn't find anyone online. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just share my journey. And that's how it began. And I was just very honestly sharing what it meant and looked like for me to be an amateur author. And over the many years, that community just grew. And I feel like there was such a need for creatives to come together and to just be like, this is this is what it looks like for me right now. What does it look like for you right now? This is me trying to deal with my muggle jobs and I can't balance this and this. And there just needed to be like a little home for us to come and just like exist within and to look at the realities of what it meant to be to pursue our creativity. And it just grew over 10 years. And about 4 years ago is when I had my little, this is my last fucking interview. I can never do another interview for a job I don't really want. So I'm going to do it myself moment. And I was like, well, I have a beautiful platform. I think I had around 20,000 followers then. I was like, I want to work with creatives. I want to support us to do what we want to do. And so I decided to move into this arena of being a book doula, so helping authors finish their books, being a creative coach, so working with artists all over the world and letting them know that I see them and that we need what it is that they're creating.
That must have been a real journey, just even in that moment when you were like, okay, I've got this audience here, it's building, it could be something. Where do I go next? I mean, even the term book doula is so unique and so special, and it does encapsulate that feeling of what you're doing and how you're coaching. But I can imagine even that process to get to that stage of, oh, do you know what? One aspect of my armory is going to be, I'm going to be a book doula. Go. How do you get started there?
Oh my God, it was such a long journey. And for so long, I felt so trapped. And I had so many stories about why I had to do a certain type of work. You know, Amie, you got to be a real adult. You got to have a real job. Like, you just got to fucking buck up and just do a job that you hate. And I kind of had this, I felt like I was like very like imprisoned, and I didn't even dare think about the alternative ways that we could do it. And I have this very clear memory. I was on a run and I can literally like see the cracks in the pavement where the idea just kind of sat and landed with me. And I was like, well, why don't you be the person that you've needed for the last like 6 years, who you've desperately needed for the last 6 years? And why don't you do that professionally? And I just remember thinking immediately, no.
Oh, our brains, what wonderful machines.
And it was probably another year until I got up the courage to really take the reins on that and to make it become manifest. But yeah, it was a long journey of continually asking, oh, this thing doesn't seem possible, but how could I make it possible? And tearing down stories that were keeping me small and recognizing that the options that I thought I had, there are actually so many more, just out of my view, just in my peripheries that I weren't even looking at, weren't acknowledging, because it wasn't the traditional routes to go down.
And that must be hard, not seeing an example of the kind of life that you want to create for yourself, that there is no path or no guidance to follow.
That makes me feel incredibly seen as you say that, because that was a really, really big part of the journey that I found really hard. I felt like I was just in the dark, like just taking one step after the other, hoping like this was going to go somewhere. And it did. It's gone somewhere so fucking abundant. And I've truly I'm living like the most enchanted life, like my dream life. But for a very long time, all I wanted was someone to just sit me down and be like, this is what you should do. And at no time did anyone come and do that. In fact, more often than not, people were like, you should not do that. And I really did want someone I wanted to copy someone almost. Yeah. But that wasn't available. And I'm so it's one of the things I'm most proud of me for being the torchbearer and doing something that I didn't see as an example.
I mean, that you just hit so many markers for me of relevance and relatability in that space. I struggle with that a lot myself, is how am I pulling this jigsaw piece of, this puzzle together? I'm like, I feel like I'm missing about 4 or 5 bits, and this is a different color. And okay, now I'm doing a whole other board game.
Yes.
So I can relate completely. And yeah, thank you for sharing so openly about that and about how challenging that is. I think there's so many people out there, particularly now, trying to create a new path. And given that our brains like pathways and like the stuff that we know, like how do we get past that? Has there been any practices? I mean, it's a leading question because I know about your journaling practice and I love it. So I want to hear more about the practices that you put in place for yourself to work through some of these almighty brain blocks.
Yeah, I have several practices, but the big one, as you said, the big one that moved me from a place of there is only one path for me and being so angry that there was only one path was journaling, because I found that I could utilize journaling as a way to alchemize really restrictive stories into the most abundant, open, caring stories and narratives that I was playing to myself over and over again. So I picked up my journal and began my practice, and I journal every single day, and I have for 4 years now. And I basically just brain dumped my pain onto the pages, and I started recognizing the narratives that were holding me back, that were keeping me encaged, that were keeping me with such a narrow view of where I was headed. And I had to have the pages in order to recognize that, because I just couldn't. It's very hard, I think, to identify what's going on in our mind when we're not seeing it anywhere, and seeing it written on the pages just gave me a bit of space to kind of acknowledge, holy shit, the way I talk to myself is crap. The way that I think my life is going is so restrictive. The narratives that I hold about who it is I am, who it is creatives are so toxic. And once I noticed the way that I spoke to myself, I was able to start rewriting it, and to find those stories wanting, and to recognize that they were just stories, and that I got to rewrite them in the way that I wanted to. And so I got to rewrite neural pathways through the pages. I got to rewrite the way my brain worked through repetition, through literally just physically taking a pen and rewriting the way I spoke to myself. And it literally, from the moment I chose to sit down and write, it changed everything. It was literally the pivot, and I can't give it enough credit.
That's the thing, isn't it? That it is effort to change those pathways.
Oh, it's so much effort.
And how do you keep yourself accountable in that?
I feel very blessed in that I love it. And I know that's not the case for everyone. And sure, there are some days where I'm like, I just don't even want to touch whatever the fuck is going on in my brain today. But to me now, I mean, it's been 4 years. It's something it's such a ridiculously long time. I don't feel good if I haven't done it in the morning, and it's become a habit. I think the easiest way, if you don't love it, is to just make it a habit, and to make it something that is effortless, because there is no need to be motivated to do it. It's just something that happens. But I need to check in with myself each day. It is as I was saying before, I never felt like I had a mentor. I never felt like anyone was ahead of me. I always, and I still do to this day, I write about it a lot. I still do have this craving for a leader or someone to just sit with me and tell me what I'm meant to be doing. But I become that person on the pages of my journal. And I feel like I need a coach, and I am my coach. And I'm my coach every single morning when I sit down. As I come to my pages and I say, oh, I feel like shit today. And then there's just this other voice that comes in and goes, that's so fine. How can we make yourself feel better? What is it that you feel up to today? You're doing so well. I'm so proud of you. Look at the way you're approaching this. Look at the way you're approaching that. You're doing such a good job. And that, because so many of us who are leading these lives, we're torchbearers, we're leaders, we need to find a coach within ourselves who's affirming our decisions, who's sitting with us and loving us, and just wrapping us up and saying, fuck, I'm so proud of you. We need that voice. And I find that voice on the pages of my journal, and I need that every day. If I don't get it, I'm going to feel too lost. What we are doing is too vulnerable. It's too scary to not have someone on your side, and it needs to be you.
And I imagine that's helped a lot with your relationship as well. As you said, living in close quarters, working together. I live, with my partner, and thankfully he's actually studying psychology, so I'm pretty grateful. I'm like, great, full-time client right here. Let's do this. But I can imagine that journaling and having that conversation with yourself and being really open and vulnerable has taken some of the pressure off.
Oh, 100%. And it kind of allows me to move through things with myself first, rather than James just getting the brunt of all my emotion. And I'm a highly emotional person. So I will explode, and having a more organized and controlled space to have an emotional outburst then allows me to have productive conversations with James, because I've already kind of moved through a lot of that hot, fiery energy, and I am very fiery. And so just and James is doesn't he does love my explosiveness, but it is a lot for him. He's autistic as well. So when I go really high, it's quite hard for him to process. So having these pages, again, it's this beautiful space for me to just sit down and coach myself. And it really helps all my relationships, because it allows me to convene with myself first, rather than putting anything on anyone else.
There's a couple of things that you touched on earlier that I want to come back to. So your art of writing and creating a book, and also your coaching. So I'll start with the book. Tell me about the first book that you wrote and the journey that you had with it.
So my first book that I wrote was fiction. I just colloquially call her Esther, because that was the name of the main character. And she was my teacher. She taught me so much about the craft that I am now in love with, and what it means to write a book. It took me 6 years to write Esther. It was a really long time. I wrote her throughout uni, and yeah, it was a huge journey, and one that I just feel like, even though like she hasn't seen the light of day, and I don't think she ever will, she taught me so much, not just about how to write fiction, but about my perfectionism, about how I procrastinate. I mean, she took me 6 years to write. Like, it was a really long time to write a book, and I tend to now be able to get one out in 6 months, 1 year. And I was able to witness a lot of what happened as I wrote that first book. And as I said, like, Esther was my teacher, and she just taught me how my resistances were playing out, and I was able to do a lot of healing from that.
It's so great that you can reflect on that, and an act or a creative act or a creation being a teacher as opposed to an end goal.
Yeah, or like a failure. She could have very easily been a failure. You know, she was rejected hundreds of times. I don't want to self-publish her. I don't really want to do anything with her. Like, you know, she's a book that doesn't get read. So it's very easy to see her as a failure. But like, everything that I am as an author now is because of her. So like, she's a teacher, not a failure.
That journey of pitching a book to a publisher, that must be an awful amount of work and an awful amount of frustration.
Yeah, it is. And it's still something I'm healing from, if I'm honest. And it's something that I think I really can see myself in 10 years' time having much more of I'm going to be able to teach better on it in 10 years' time, because I can still feel myself processing what it meant for me to go through so much rejection, to pitch. I still have issues to this day with putting myself out there in a position that doesn't seem like the power dynamics are the same. So because the gatekeeping of publishing can make you feel so small. And as a creator, as a human, like, you know, I want to feel seen and understood for who I am. And the process of pitching novels and getting so much rejection or receiving silence really impacted me. And I still feel the wounding from I've done thousands of submissions. I still feel that wounding, even in small moments, you know, day to day, when I don't feel seen, I can still feel that wound. So there's lots of healing to be done there. And there's definitely ways that you can pitch your book and, you know, have a really healthy relationship with it. But interestingly enough, for me, it wasn't healthy. And it's definitely something I'm still healing.
Well, it seems to have assisted in taking you to this place where you feel able to share so eloquently about the experience, which I imagine just played so beautifully into becoming a book doula. How did you get started in that space? Did you write a plan? Did you find a client first and work it out later, as we so often do? How did that go?
So this was this was me being like, fuck it, don't want to fucking work in marketing. I'm really sorry, I didn't even ask if I could swear.
Oh, you can swear.
Okay, great.
100%.
Okay, great. And I was like, well, I'm just going to create, I think I created like 3 different offerings, and I specifically started with authors first. Now I work with any creative entrepreneur, anyone who wants to make something. But at the beginning, it was just authors, because that was my space that I knew. And I was like, I made 3 different ways that you could work with me. And I was basically like, the pitch was, I'm done with your bullshit. Let's just get this book written. Because from the amount of authors that I spoke with, in my community and Inspired to Write, who just could not finish their books. I was like, this is such a huge pain point, and it can be so painful for us creatives when we just cannot complete these envisioned projects. It's so painful. So that was what I said. And then it was a bit of I didn't really have a plan. I knew how I finished books. I knew what I needed. I knew the issues that came up, and I'd witnessed a lot of issues in the creatives around me. I was like, I just want to be there and witness you as you do this work and support you as much as I can. And so I was like, these are available. And then, just slowly got one client, and then just sort of played it out like that. And then the next client, and then it evolved. And now I don't even do one-on-ones anymore. I just run my community, the Inspired Collective, and we work as a community together.
What did that first email? I'm imagining that the first client might have come through via email or message.
Yeah.
How did that feel when that landed?
It's so synchronous. Like her name is Laura, and she's like one of my dearest friends now. I probably speak to her every day. And I was so nervous. And she was like, I think this is something that I really want to do. And I was just like, first of all, I was so shocked. I was like, you want to do this? And then I remember our first meeting, and I had just basically read a section of her book, and we just discussed it. And it was just like, it was just beautiful. Like, creatives need each other to bounce ideas off, to relish their ideas, to even just sit there and be like, wow, I'm so proud of you for what you've already accomplished. And it was just exactly what I had intended it to be. And Laura is so special to me. And as I said, like, that was 4 and a bit years ago, and we still speak to each other nearly daily.
Oh, that's so lovely. Yeah, these creative connections that you're able to make, and that community is just such an important part of building all these things together. And there's a lot of beautiful natural progressions that become quite obvious in your journey. You kind of see how one thing leads to another, even though it might not be perfectly clear up front for you or for anybody else, because Lord knows, no one knows our journey. No one gets to tell us what our journeys are. But podcasting is such a beautiful natural extension for you. And I imagine that was a bit of a journey, sitting down and thinking like, do you know what, I'm going to do this. Like, where did you get started?
So James now co-hosts the podcast and has for the last few years, and it has been the most incredible experience. But when I started, I was just like, okay, got like an $100 mic from JB Hi-Fi and sat down and I was like, I'm just going to do like one of my posts, but I'm just going to talk to the mic. And I'm an actor actually by trade. So like initially, like I was on stage speaking a lot. So like the speaking part really appealed to me. I really enjoy public speaking. And so I was like, I'll just sit with a mic and I'll just talk to it. And I loved it. It was diarizing. It was kind of a form of journaling. And so when we did a website swap, we lost a lot of the first season, which is a shame, but you can really see the journey. If you look at those audio files, like it was just me moving through so much of this transitional stuff. And I just spoke to the mic and just let people witness me and, the bizarre mess that it is trying to create a creative life. And then it developed as, I became an entrepreneur, as my partner started working with me, and then James came on, and now it's just this beautiful conversation between two creatives, two authors. And it's literally one of my favorite things to do.
There's a lot of moments there where, we kind of get to the idea and the excitement, but then there's all those little frustrations in the middle. So, how do you actually get an audio file from?
Oh my God, yes.
Like onto, it's endless. Do you just find that really frustrating? How do you work
I'm the worst. Like I'm super not detail oriented. I'm very macro. Like I just cannot be fucked with any details. And obviously as being someone who's a torchbearer, as you said, we are the ones that are always taking the first step, especially with tech. It's often really hard. People haven't done what you've done before. And when I first started podcasting, like trying to deal with my RSS feed, like I cried a lot. And luckily I have James now, who's much better and much more patient and much more better with the tiny details. And he does a lot of it so that I don't blow up. But yeah, when we are innovative, there's a lot of stuff that you have to kind of navigate that a lot of people haven't ever navigated before. And I think particularly with tech, that can be really challenging because like people literally just haven't made the stuff that you need.
Oh my God, this is me right now with calendar integrations. I'm like, why can't I have my calendars in one spot? If anyone knows how to do that, please help me.
The amount of times I'll sit there and I'll be like, it is 2022. Why doesn't this exist yet? But it's because we're at the forefront of creation, and it's a good sign. I think when you find that there's no tech for what you need, you're at the forefront of it, and you're the one that's torch bearing, and that's a good sign. But it also freaking sucks.
It's such an interesting angle to put on it, and such an interesting reminder. I have a history of, it's actually why this podcast was born. I have a history of looking for the solution. So I know I want to do more. I know I want to be more. I know I want to create more. And I'm frustratingly trying to find the passion, the thing that's just going to go from here to here. And, but I have 1,000 things that are interesting and that are really exciting. And so, always looking for the story or what's come before or the solution up front is a challenge. And I really like that you spin it and you make it about, well, it doesn't exist. So that's because it's my job to create it or to just go through the mess. It's a really lovely angle to put on it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's how you got to see it. Otherwise, I mean, to be fair, in the moment, I don't see it like that. In the moment, I'm like, this is a joke.
I feel that. Yeah, everything with the eye of perspective, looking at it.
I can be so wise retrospectively. You should see me in the fire.
Are you a person who responds to being asked a question to allow the answer to come out?
It's a really excellent question in itself. I think so. Yeah. I mean, I really love to ideate with other people. And that's why I'm so grateful that my husband is a creative as well. I really conversation is really important in the way that I ideate, I think.
I love that because it just comes back into that, it's okay to just talk it out and not have all the answers.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we've got to get there somehow. And you have a lot of really interesting mixes to your career right now as it stands. You're highly, highly creative. And then a little bit more, ironically, it's good that you didn't get into that marketing gig because it seems you do a lot of marketing now. So you kind of ended up doing it anyway. But techie things, business things, that's a lot to balance at once. Do you ever get frustrated or what sort of challenges come up for you when you're like business hat, creative hat?
Something that I've discovered, and I know that this grates with a lot of artists because they really don't find it to be the same way for them, but my business hat is so fucking creative that I can hardly tell where the lines are. Like, my art is business and my business is art. Like, it just all feels like I am being the most creative version of myself, especially with the business part of it. Obviously with the tech, like, no, that is not art to me in any way. But I'm very blessed to have my partner who works for me, and he often takes that over. But for the entrepreneur side of things and the business side of things, it's like an art form to me, and I am so obsessed with it.
A wonderful way to look at it. I think the term artist, I find I've chatted to a couple of artists on this podcast, traditional artists who have an art practice. And even those guys will, say they're doing like a painter, right? And they're like struggle to say I'm an artist. But so even from that space, when you take it to like over here, like so many of us are artists. I mean,
oh my
I guess
God.
that's the point I'm trying to get to. And the word artist gets pigeonholed into this act of creating a piece of art in whatever form. And I really love that you give new life and energy to the word artist, and how you can look at yourself and your own potential as an artist for everything from what you create in your world, what you create in business, what you create. And I just think that's a really interesting space to get to. Was even getting to that a challenge for you? Did you struggle with the artist term?
Yes, I struggled more with the term author. So that was what I had to claim. I had the word aspiring author always prefixed that for a long time. But then I really came to, well, if I'm writing, I'm a writer, and if I've written a book, then I'm an author, and really tried to like logically, like, if I do, then I am. And then I'm really grateful for you noticing how I use the term artist, because it is really important to me. And it comes from, and my perspective shift there in terms of like how I define the term artist came from Seth Godin. I think it was from his book, The Icarus Deception. And he just says, anyone who creates something with the intention to connect is an artist. And I loved that so much. And so anyone who creates something with an intention to connect with another human being is making art. And that's just like, as soon as I read it, it just like wormed its way into my heart, and it sat at the center of what it is I do. And so when I say I work with artists, I work with anyone who wants to make something to connect with another.
That is fantastic. I'm going to put that on a poster and put it on my wall. And I love how ironic it is that it came from a marketing guru.
I know. Love that.
You really brought this around. It's just like you segued back so beautifully. I would love to talk about something that you have just released recently. Actually, there's a couple of things that you have released recently that I would like to touch on. But a fictional piece of work, The Rules Upheld by No One. When did that story start to come into your world, and what did you do first with that?
So The Rules Upheld by No One, I probably started writing her maybe 6 years ago. And I wrote her really quickly. Like, I've never had this experience with a book before or after, but she just fell into my lap. And I was like, I love this idea. I love what you want to say. And I wrote her very, very quickly in 6 months. And she was just this beautiful story inspired by my degree. I did a medieval degree, and I specialized in sexuality and like sex culture in the medieval times. So it's a beautiful, slightly raunchy, but just like very relatable story that's set in the 16th century. And where was I even going with this? Yeah, she was written. I put her into a lot of publishing houses. She was even picked up for a hot minute by a publishing house, which obviously was incredibly exciting. At that point, I was a personal trainer, like waking up at like 4 a.m, like training people, doing deadlifts, just putting all my hopes that this tentative, they took it to an acquisition meeting, and the editors were really hopeful that they were gonna buy her, and then they never ever got back to me. And it never didn't matter how much I messaged them. I felt like, again, I felt so small. Like, they took it to an acquisition meeting, and I'd been promised, you'll know by the end of the day. And this was like my whole, like, I was like everything pinned on it. It was one of the biggest days of my life. And they just like, I've to this day not heard back from them.
Oh my goodness. Did their entire building
I
just
know.
sink into the ground? How hard is it to get an email?
I know. So it was incredibly difficult. And that again, that's a lot of the pain that I work on healing each day, because it just felt so, I mean, you can imagine, it was just like, felt so invisible.
Awful.
Yeah. And so she sat in the shadows for a while. I kept writing more books. And then I decided, after a huge, like, really a lot of inner work had to be done. That, you know, she was a really good book and that I wanted her to be put out into the world. And so I published her last September with, you know, did an audiobook, did it all, like, you know, beautiful cover. And it was just incredible to see her actually be out in the world some like 4 years after she was written.
Wow. And it's so true. You never know, what is it? The day you plant the seed is not the day you eat the fruit, you know, something like that. You never know when that opportunity or that creative piece of work, that idea is going to come back and it's going to be such a big part of your life. So it's so nice to hear that came back in. And did you self-publish?
Yeah. So I self-published.
How was that journey?
It was, again, like, because it was very emotional for me because I had so many blocks against it. Because to me, what it felt, well, the initial story was, oh, nobody picked you, so you had to pick yourself. And, you know, there was a huge shift for me in this self-publishing process where I'd say, I pick myself before anybody else can pick me. I coronate myself before anybody gives me permission. I do not need permission to be a very successful author. I do not need permission to be witnessed. And so it was a really emotional process. It was also a difficult process in terms of it's really boring. And I didn't want to do this part of the publishing process. And for me, it was very confronting having to do the process that I didn't want to have to do so regularly, as in like figuring out how to do, you know, my IBSN and like all the self-publishing parts of it. So we did eventually end up employing a beautiful woman called Linda, who really supported me along that process, and she helps authors get self-published. And so she was kind of like my publisher. But yeah, then we got an audiobook recorded. I got to record my own audiobook, which is literally like a dream come true. And I had so much fun.
It's so exciting for you to hear how things have evolved and things have gone on. And I guess this has been quite a long timeline for you in a career-wise to get to the stage where financially you feel safe enough to employ somebody to help you. I mean, how have you managed that along the way? And how do you stay on top of the expectations you might have for your finances versus the opportunity?
Oh yeah, I love to talk about finances. I'm really working on my money stories. Today I even set an alarm. This is my new finance self-work. And the alarm says that I have to look at my bank account every day because I spent so long with my head in the sand because I was in like tens of thousands of dollars worth of credit card debt. And I just couldn't look at my bank account. It was so scary to me. And I still carry that to this day. Like I still only let James look at the bank account, even though, you know, we're doing so much better. We're doing so well, but I don't want to look at it. So today I put an alarm on and every day I have to look.
I love that.
It is amazing. Like when we go on journeys like this, particularly as creators, like how our money stories play into it and how our finances play into it. And it's been interesting as I learned that it is safe, you know, now to invest in getting help. It is safe to, you know, invest in new projects. Like it's a huge journey. Like our stories about money, particularly as artists who have just been fed the scarcity myths again and again and again, the starving artist, et cetera, rewriting those narratives for me has been so profoundly life-changing. And the more I rewrite them, the more abundant my life becomes.
Have there been moments where you've spent money in some place and you've gone, oh, that was a bad move? Have you had that experience?
Oh yeah, wouldn't be a true businesswoman without them, you know. Yeah. Let me try and think of a good example. Well, right now at the moment, we've been investing we're doing a European tour. So we're going over to Europe and I'm doing one-on-one sessions in Berlin, in Copenhagen, in Stockholm and in London, which is obviously a big investment in terms of just getting over there and the travel and everything. But I'm super excited about it. And this, you know, the sessions have almost sold out, but again, probably our biggest investment that we've done in one big lump sum, getting us over to Europe, but really exciting. So that was definitely a risk. But in terms of risks that haven't played out, we played around a lot with Facebook advertising. And look, it wasn't a huge failure, but it was a huge amount of money. Well, for us, we were spending like $200 a day at one point.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. And whilst we made it back, like, did it benefit us? Like we had a lot of voices in our ears, you know, a lot of marketing experts, people being like, no, this is the way to do it. This is why you're getting new followers. This is why you're getting sales. And, you know, maybe it was, but we've backed out now and we don't spend any money there anymore. And we do better than we have. And we don't spend $200 a day. Big learning curve.
That is a big learning curve. And did you ever invest in Instagram marketing?
Yeah, so it was Facebook and Instagram marketing.
And Instagram,
yeah, so and we did YouTube. It, again, really interesting, right? Like, and I don't regret it. It was interesting to look at it in that way and to play around with that, but it didn't. I don't think it actually. I mean, it's very hard to know.
Yes, there's an old marketing quote from like the 50s, I think it is, which is like 50% of my marketing works, I just don't know which half, or something. There's something like that. I always get my analogies and my quotes wrong. So I'll probably listen to that back and be like, "Ooh, that was so
wrong.
very, very wrong."
No, but I really relate.
Yeah, I asked about Instagram in particular because I find, and this is the thing that comes through in some of my chats with people, is I find the algorithm so frustrating and the opportunities to grow and create audience today so challenging that I always have an interest in what might work in that space, or the journeys you have to go through, or the stories you tell yourself about what might work and what's a failure in that space. And yeah, it's just an interesting world.
Yeah, I could talk about that a lot as well, and like, because it's always changing, it's always relevant conversation. But yeah, it's very, very difficult to navigate. I'm finding it incredibly difficult to navigate that space at the moment. As someone, with a larger account, I have like unbelievable stats, like -50, -80% of like interaction, engagement, no growth at all, and just like one day you just wake up and it's completely different. And then you start being like, okay, so what have I done wrong? And all those thought processes aren't actually really that helpful at all, because it's so random and it's so unknowable. And I think too many creators are spending and it's me too, it's definitely me too, are spending way too much of our energy trying to figure out a system that is constantly changing on us and that we will never fully be able to grasp. But it's about how can we still use these platforms that are in a way that aren't exhausting us and are still beneficial for us in some way.
The analysis paralysis,
exactly,
can be such a frustrating place. I know I often work in a space where understanding an audience, or understanding, because I do work in marketing as well, understanding the audience and how it relates into messaging and how it goes into that. And I find that whilst interesting, an endless struggle, because I'm like, I just want to come up with a great idea.
I know.
And kind of just go with it and see what happens, and maybe just figure it out based on the response. But it's not the easiest place to play.
No, I mean, I'm super strategic. So I really try and take the perspective from my socials that like it's play, and it's like, what can we make work, and trying to take away some of that like, oh, this is such a personal attack on who I am, as really trying to play it like a game. And some people really, really reject the idea. They're like, I don't want to play with it like it's a game, it's my art. And totally, that's really valid. But the way that I find I can actually sustain this is like, I'm going to play it like a game, because otherwise I'm going to take it too personally. So, I will have multiple different types of content that I'll try and play with. I'll have a consistent pattern of sharing it, and I'll look at what's doing well, what's not doing well. And yeah, I guess I put on my business hat a bit more than my like author's hat in that sense, and just kind of, to see what's working, what's resonating, what's not resonating, and to see it a bit as a game.
It's such a great angle to play on it. And I can see how your theatre or your acting learnings, it might be coming back into that.
Yeah.
I think that's it. It's an interesting way to look at it, because you're so right. And whenever you kind of go to put yourself in someplace, even when I come to the podcast microphone or anything, putting anything on socials, you're putting yourself out there, and it's a real, you kind of have to put a cloak on a little bit and be like, I'm just having some fun. It's nobody's going to remember anyway what I said or I did in that thing. So just have a bit of a play with it, and
I think
get out of your own way a bit.
That's something that I come back to all the time. It's like, nobody actually gives a flying fuck.
So true.
And we can really convince ourselves that people are like thinking about our Instagrams right now. They're thinking about how I did that thing and it was weird. And it's like, no one is thinking about that, Amie. Like, no one.
It's so true. When you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not thinking about like somebody else's conversation that was weird. You're like thinking about that time that you told one person in a scenario that they, and said something weird, and then you just replay that over in your own head.
Exactly. It's the time to zoom out, I think, when it comes to socials, because we're letting them get a hold of our hearts, and we need to keep our hearts for our art, and our hearts for us. And so for me, I'm zooming out because I just don't want Zuckerberg to have his grasp on me. I want to be using this in a way that serves me, even if it is changing a lot, even if it is fucking annoying. Like I'm just going to play around with it, see what works, and keep my heart safe.
And do you seem to place a lot of alternatives in your revenue streams? So you don't seem to come across like you put everything into one basket, but you are constantly evolving. Is that a purposeful strategy?
Yeah, and it really like pleases me to hear you say that. Yeah, so this has also been something to protect me like from well, to protect our business and to protect my art is to make sure that we have a lot of revenue streams, not just revenue streams, but marketing streams as well. Obviously, I have a really big, well, not really big, like I have 90,000 followers on Instagram, which is an incredible space to connect with people. But I was finding that I was just putting too many eggs in one basket. Like I was just like, that was all I could focus on because it was giving me big dopamine hits. So it was like, if I could like work on that, it felt like I was really doing something. But it's just, you know, I just recognized how dangerous it was, both for me and my heart, but also for the business to only be focusing on this one space to connect. And so now, you know, we have the podcast and we have our membership and we have a beautiful email list and like just growing so many different, there's so many ways to connect. And so for me, it's been so important to make sure we diversify all the different ways that we connect. And also it's so creative. Like now I get to, you know, connect with people by using my voice, by writing long form emails, by teaching masterclasses. There's so many different ways now to connect with artists. So we do that in terms of like making sure we've got lots of different streams for our marketing. And then in terms of like revenue, we have, you know, so many different offerings and so many different ways in which we can connect and people can interact with us. And that's fun for me because I get to be, you know, have a lot of different creative pursuits at once, but it's also great for us financially and for us as a business because we have all these different ways that people can connect, and some are passive, some are not passive, but there's just a lot going on there. And I really thrive off that as a creative, and our business thrives off that.
2 questions actually I wanted to ask you. The first one is looking at all of those revenue streams, I'm thinking, and all those activities and connection points, I'm imagining what a day in your life might look like. And I'm curious as to whether you have assistance or help or anyone that kind of helps you get above.
James says, I mean, I feel like I'm so fucking lucky. Like my husband is also an author. He loves this work and this is our business together. So we get to split the work in that way. We also have, I've employed a community manager for our Inspire Collective for the membership. So she just takes profound care of the people and authors and creators that exist in that community. And we also have a tech guy who helps us with a few of like, I can't be bothered to make a reel. Like, he does all the unpublished podcast,
Fantastic.
like tech stuff. Yeah. So that's amazing. You know, we've gotten help there. But in terms of like what a day of my life looks like, I could not tell you, Kim. Like I have a structured morning and then like all bets are off. Like I don't know what I do with my days. I'm guessing I get stuff done, right? Because like stuff does eventually get done, but I don't know how.
Oh, I love to hear that because I often look at my own days and just think, come on, you know, like you've got some good skills here. You can get it together, like block your, you know, chunk your days up and focus on one task at a time and make sure you knock off the same time every day. But it just is not how the energy flows.
It isn't. And it's been, again, that's a journey I'm still on, is trying to figure out how best I work. And it's been 4 years of working for myself, or even longer, really, because I was unemployed for a long time, and like trying to manage my time in unemployment feels almost similar to how I manage my time now, because it's just me, right? I'm the boss and I have to manage how I show up. And making sure that the boss part of me is not a dick has been a really big journey. And yeah, that time management part of me is just a bit of a loose unit. And so it is a really interesting journey being self-employed.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really appreciate that, about how much of a journey it is. You kind of look at the end goal and be like, look at all these things that are happening, but it is most certainly not an easier option.
No,
this way.
It's definitely, it's different, and it's requiring me to do a huge amount of inner work, which I'm always very grateful for. But it's also taking a really long time for me to figure this out. Like, isn't it time? Yeah.
Isn't it so funny, the time restrictions we put on ourselves though? Like, shouldn't we have it worked out by this point? Like, where does that come from?
I know, all those shoulds. And you're so right to call me out on that, because not only will I never really get to the bottom of how, you know, I design my days, it will change because I'm constantly changing and work is changing and creating different things. And I think that might be why for so many creatives who work for themselves, or, you know, for so many creatives full stop, our time management can look really different, and having super structured days often doesn't work for us because we're so variable and we're so ever changing and ebbing and flowing.
And thinking about your next steps and what's happening for you, is there a dream creation that you have in the back of your mind that you're hoping to get stuck into one day?
Like long term, or like this? I'm actually not a very big long-term thinker, which is really interesting. So I've got like this year planned out, and, you know, I know that I'll constantly keep writing my fiction, and I want to, you know, keep writing my nonfiction, and I'd love to have another new journaling book out. But the specifics aren't there yet. But for this year, we're focusing on this beautiful tour. It's so much fun getting to plan, meeting all these people in all these beautiful places. And then hopefully by the end of the year, my second book, Maud, I don't have a full title for her yet. I always just call my books by the name of their main character. Maud will be out by the end of the year, which is another 16th century book about witches.
Wonderful. And are you self-publishing again?
I'm self-publishing again, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's very
you.
exciting.
You.
And you just share so much of your journey, and coming right back to that moment where you said, if I can't find the thing that I need right now, I'm just going to become that thing that I need right now for other people, and allowing that to flow and allowing that to grow into something. I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there grateful to be able to witness your journey in that space, because it does give permission for others to try the same, and to say, do you know what? It's fine. There's plenty of people out there with absolutely no plan, riding their wave, just turning rocks over that feel interesting and curious, and allowing that to evolve. So thank you for all the work that you do in that space, and all of the support that you offer to the people that connect with you, whether it be through your unpublished podcast. You have a new podcast as well.
Yeah, so that was I was thinking of this when I was talking about wrangling with tech at the forefront of like tech being, it's a paid podcast, and we put it out before Spotify and iTunes have just, like, literally a month after we released it, have just released their paid podcast platform. And if anyone wants to create paid podcasts, now much easier. But we have It's Time to Write, which is a paid podcast, and it's 60 episodes, and basically I'm like your little creative angel. They're like 2-3 minute episodes each day, and it's basically, if you want to do 60 days of creation, and it doesn't have to be all in a row, I'm there to be your coach, basically, and to get up with you and to say, hey, baby, it's time. Let's sit down. Let's create. And I sit with you until you're sitting down and you're creating.
That's fantastic. And look, right at the forefront of the tech that doesn't exist yet again. But there's so much work that you're putting out there to support others. How can the listener and I support you on your journey?
It's a beautiful question, Kim. Thank you for asking. You can pop onto my website and just have a browse around. Like, we've got podcasts, we've got books, there's courses there, journaling courses. If this journaling part of this podcast has resonated with you, that's probably my most popular offering. It's a journaling course. And if you even sign up to my mailing list, you get my first self-published book, which is the journaling compendium, which is 31 days of journaling prompts, big, like hundreds of questions to just like let you explore who it is you are and let you coach yourself. And then of course there's like a few spots left for anyone who's in Europe and who wants to come have a cup of coffee with me in Copenhagen and talk creativity.
God, that sounds absolutely glorious. I wish I was there. I will put all of the links to your connection points and your offerings in the show notes. I cannot believe how quickly our time together has flown today.
Oh my God, it has flown.
I could talk to you all day long.
I know, this has been so delightful.
I'm so grateful that you've shared your story with me in this way, and a little bit more of the behind the scenes of Amie. So thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you for seeing me, Kim. I'm very grateful.
And listener, thank you for seeing me, for supporting this podcast and allowing me to keep bringing you these stories. You can keep helping me by leaving a star rating and a review. Hopefully it's 5 stars, but look, when you put this stuff out there, it might not be everybody's cup of tea, and that's just part of it. So whatever you think it deserves is fine by me. You can share this episode on your socials or with your friends and family over dinner, or just flick me a DM at Unemployed and Afraid on all the platforms, just letting me know what you thought. It all helps. And if no one else told you today, you're doing amazingly. Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the stories of starting over with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you liked the episode and are keen to hear more, please hit the follow button and leave a review. And let's keep the conversation going on Instagram at Unemployed and Afraid, where there's more goodies and links to today's show notes. See you there.